Welcome to footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, bring you a 2011 FCS conference preview on the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. We're going to take a look at the MEAC top to bottom, team by team. So let's start with the recruiting trail and see how well these teams recruited this past offseason. Best recruiting class in the MEAC, I'm going with Morgan State. I like what they've done defensively. They addressed a lot of their defensive needs and built this team up for the future. But the one guy that stands out the most is right tackle DeMarco Bisbee. At 6'3", 280 pounds, this guy lives for the run game, very dominant run blocker, and should be a fixture on that Bears offensive line. Some other key recruits you want to look out for. Quarterback Quentin Williams is an explosive playmaker from the quarterback position, and that should make head coach Brian Jenkins a very happy man. You look at Delaware State getting linebacker L.B. Williams, 6 feet 210, a guy that's a real thumper and should grow into a guy that's about 230 pounds, be a tremendous player for the Hornets. Florida A&M getting themselves a linebacker, and Darius Powell, a guy that's very fast and plays downhill, should be an outstanding player for the Rattlers. Chris Dukes has the skill set to make sure Hampton continues to have a great lineage of tailbacks. You want to talk about great leadership skills, you have to talk about Greg McGee, a guy that's going to remind some people of Ted White that used to terrorize the opposing defenses in the mid-90s. North Carolina Central wanted to get explosive on the edge, and they did so with Alex Cole, a guy that's going to be a tremendous player for the Eagles. Spartan fans should be happy to get this guy. James Lynch should be an outstanding target near the red zone with his athleticism. Jordan Mincy is a guy that I really like, plays 110% each and every down, a guy that's going to be a valuable member of this Tigers defense. The Bulldogs went with 2 tailbacks this class, but I really like Jalen Simmons, a guy that's 5'8", 200 pounds and runs with a purpose. Now here's some MEAC superlatives, starting with the best quarterbacks in conference. You have to go with Norfolk State. Quarterback Chris Wiley is a guy that I really like. He has mobility, can do it on the ground and in the air, but it's his precision with the football. 61% of his passes, 10 touchdowns. This guy's going to lead a very underrated Spartan offense. Best group of running backs, you have to go with South Carolina State. They have 2 talented tailbacks. One in Ashton Jordan. This guy had over 600 yards rushing last year, 5.8 yards to carry. And backup Chris Merrill is another guy that could probably be a starter on a lot of FCS teams. And they also add 2 impact true freshmen. Best receiving core, I'm going with Norfolk State. You look at the Spartans, return 2 of their top wide receivers, and both are very explosive. Victor Harrison, over 580 yards receiving, and Reggie Garrett, a guy that had 14.5 yards a catch. Both guys are tremendous playmakers and should look to have a breakout year this season. Best offensive line, it's a tie. Bethune-Cookman has a very talented front 5. You look at guys like Natil Curry and also Alex Moreau. Both guys are all conference, and they have a bevy of junior college transfers that should help continue the Wildcats' excellence on offense. And the Rattlers also house themselves a very talented offensive line led by center Shelly Anthony and tackle Brandon Curry. Both guys keep this Rattler offense explosive. Best defensive line, I'm going to Florida A&M. Jerry Willis is a very talented defensive end guy that can get pressure on the quarterback, 4.5 sacks. And they also get pressure from within with defensive tackle Nicholas Hollinghead. These guys have a tenacious front 4. Best group of linebackers, I'm going with Bethune-Cookman. These guys have a talented trio of linebackers, guys like Ryan Lewis, Reggie Sandelin, and also Rock Angren. These guys combined have over 25 tackles for loss, which tells me they live in the backfield. Best secondary unit, I'm going with North Carolina A&T. The Aggies boast 2 of the top playmakers in the secondary in conference. You look at cornerback Devontae Graham and free safety Justin Farrell. Both guys are all conference players, and Devontae Graham had 7 interceptions last season. Best special teams unit, I'm going with Florida A&M. These guys boast 2 of the top kickers in conference, and punter Brandon Holdren with 40 yards a punt, and kicker Trevor Scott, a guy that went 10 out of 14 last season. They also have an outstanding returner in James Owens. Offensive MVP, I'm going with receiver Justin Wilson out of Delaware State, guy that had over 15 yards a catch, 900 yards receiving, and 11 touchdowns. The key cog in the Hornets offense, and he is a go-to playmaker. Defensive MVP, I'm going with Michael Williams out of Bethune-Cookman. This guy is a versatile safety, 6 interceptions last season, but also is not afraid to come up and lay the pop in the run game. This is why he's on the radar of a lot of NFL scouts. Freshman of the year in the MEAC, I'm going with tailback Jalen Simmons out of South Carolina State. I just like the way the kid runs. This guy is very smooth, natural runner, and should get an opportunity in that Bulldogs backfield, and I'm willing to bet he's going to make the most out of that chance. Best pro prospect, you can go with one of 5 guys, but I'm going with Mike Mayhew out of North Carolina A&T. This guy reminds me a lot of Ahmad Bradshaw that plays for the New York Giants. Mayhew had over 1,100 yards last season, 4.9 yards a carry, and what makes him impressive is his great burst and quickness through the hole. Team on the rise in the MEAC, I'm going with Delaware State. There's already a lot of talent on this roster, but they have to learn a new scheme this year, so once they get that under wraps, this team could be very dangerous. Toughest schedule in the MEAC, I'm going with North Carolina A&T. The Aggies have a vicious road slate. You look at the back half of their schedule with all those conference road games, traveling to Florida A&M and South Carolina State. In the beginning of the season, they have to go to App State and play a tough Coastal Carolina team at home. This is a tough slate for a young Aggies team that's looking to rebuild this season. Prediction time in the MEAC, starting with Savannah State. Reasons for optimism. I love the backfield combo with Sheldon Barnes and also Justin Babb. These guys can really run the rock, especially as they lean on the running game more this year. And they have a big playmaker at wide receiver in Brian Lackey, a guy that had over 14.5 yards a catch. Causes for concern, the offensive line. They gave up 37 sacks last season. That is atrocious. And defensively, they gave up 40 points a game and 5.5 yards a carry on the ground. But what we'll learn is that Steve Davenport, first-year coach, will have Savannah State headed in the right direction. Next up, we have the Howard Bison. Reasons for optimism. Defensively, you have to love outside linebacker Keith Pugh, a guy that had over 100 tackles, 10.5 sacks, really taken to that 3-4 defense they ran last year. And wide receiver Willie Carter, 563 yards receiving, 19 yards a catch. There's a lot of explosiveness on that side of the football as well. Causes for concern, the quarterback position. Can they find a leader of that offense, a guy that's going to consistently keep them ahead of the chains? And also defensively, can they make the adjustment to a 4-3 defense? But what we learn is that head coach Gary Harrell will bring a lot of excitement and has his own bevy of recruits to go with an already talented roster. And you can see Howard makes some noise in these conference games. At number 9, I have North Carolina Central. Reasons for optimism. I love talented wide receiver Giovanni Irvine. Should have another huge year for the Eagles offensively. And defensively, they took their linebacker Roger Stewart and moved him down to defensive end. He's going to double in his sack production and should get pressure on the quarterback. Causes for concern. They're very thin on the offensive line. They need to build some depth at that position. And defensively, they got depleted by graduation. So they have to fill some holes, especially on the D-line and in the secondary. But what we will learn is that you look at first-year coach Henry Frazier, by mid-season should have these guys headed in the right direction and look for a very improved team toward the end of the season. At number 8, I'm going with North Carolina A&T. Reasons for optimism. Bringing in Rob Broadway was a huge hire for the Aggies, so you can expect an increased workload for Mike Mayhew on the ground. And with that, receivers Wallace Miles and Taurus Warren should benefit from looser coverage out there on the edge. And they have the best secondary in conference, so that should help out the defense. Causes for concern. Offensively, they have to find a quarterback. That's the biggest key about this team. They have to get someone that could be the leader of that offense. And they have to find some type of pass rush on the ground and get these linebackers up to speed to step up and stop the run. But what we will learn is that with Rob Broadway as the head coach, the Aggies will pull off an upset or two on the road this season. Next up is Delaware State. Reasons for optimism. You have to love quarterback Nick Elko and what he was able to do in limited duty last year. So expect him to take an even bigger jump this season. And there's already a stacked roster of talent. Offensively, Jashawn Jones at the tailback spot, 700 yards rushing. And Justin Wilson leads a deep wide receiving core. And defensively, I like their defensive line. There's a lot of activity up front. Causes for concern. They have to look at what they lost in the back half of that defense. You look at the linebackers and secondary, all room for improvement there. And they also breaking in a new head coach, which means they're breaking in a new scheme. But what we'll learn is that with the talent Delaware State have on this roster already, they're going to be headed in the right direction. Maybe not this year, but definitely next season. Next up is the Hampton Pirates. Reasons for optimism. I like the tailback they have. And Antoine Chisholm, this guy should have an outstanding year this season. Should top over 1,000 yards. You look at receiver Javaris Brown, another very good playmaker, 16 yards a catch. And the offensive line is very solid. And getting linebacker Julio Sanchez back is going to be huge for that defense. Causes for concern. They have to figure out what's going to happen at the QB spot. There's still a big question mark coming out of the spring at that position. And you also look at the defense. They got depleted defensively. A lot of their big playmakers are gone, especially on the front four. But what we will learn is that Hampton, on with the solid running game and a solid offensive line, should be in every ball game this year. At number 5, I have Morgan State. Reasons for optimism. You have to like the fact that 9 starters returned on the offense, so they're very solid on the offensive line. All 4 starters returned. And you also look at the receiving corps, very talented playmakers. They just have to get someone to get these guys the football. And defensively, I like the depth in the front 7. The D-line and linebackers are going to be very solid this year. Causes for concern. You look at the quarterback spot. They're going to start Donovan Dickerson this year. Yes, he had an outstanding spring, but I'm still worried about those 8 interceptions he threw last season. And the secondary, can they get better? They've been struggling the last couple of years. But what we will learn is that Morgan State has the schedule and the depth in place to make a run and a push for a conference title. At number 4, I have Norfolk State. Reasons for optimism. You have to love the passing game, from the offensive line being very solid and not allowing a lot of sacks, to the guy at quarterback, Chris Wiley, to the 2 talented wide receivers in Victor Harrison and Reggie Garrett. So they're going to be potent in the passing game. Defensively, they can get to the quarterback, they can stop the run, and that's going to cause a lot of problems in the MEAC for these pass-happy offenses, and the secondary should still be opportunistic. Causes for concern, the ground game. They have to replace D'Angelo Branch, who was phenomenal for them last season. And there's a big hole at linebacker. Who's going to step up and be the guy, and can they continue the run defense dominance? But what we will learn is that you want to keep an eye on Norfolk State, because these guys are my dark horse candidate to win the conference title. At number 3, I'm going with South Carolina State. Reasons for optimism. As long as head coach Buddy Pugh is back there, they're going to have a chance to be successful. And you have to like the running game. Ashton Jordan, Chris Merrill are guys that can really run the rock. On the receiving side, they have some talent. Linnell Elmore, if he's eligible, makes this group very explosive, but he may not be. So Tyler McDonald and Thomas Williams are going to have to pick up the slack. Causes for concern. The O-line and D-line got depleted by graduation, so they're going to struggle on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And the linebacking core has some questions. But what we will learn is that with the schedule they have, and with Buddy Pugh's ability to get the most out of his players, it wouldn't surprise me if South Carolina State ends up in the playoffs. At number 2, I'm going with Florida A&M. Reasons for optimism for the Rattlers. You look at the defensive line and offensive line. When you're solid on both sides of the line of scrimmage, you're always going to have success. And on the defensive side, the linebackers are very stout and a very versatile group. And the secondary is also very active due to their defensive line's excellence. Offensively, they have some talent at wide receiver. They don't have the big playmakers that they usually have, but there's still a lot to like about the receiving core. Causes for concern. They're going to struggle in the run game. They have to replace Philip Sylvester, who was an outstanding tailback, and quarterback play still has to be settled, although they did get transferred Tyler Bass from Memphis, and true freshman Dane James may see some time. But what we'll learn is that with the offensive and defensive line being solid, look for Florida A&M to probably push for a conference title and get into the playoffs and make some noise. At number 1, I'm going with Bethune-Cookman. Reasons for optimism. Head coach Brian Jenkins should do a phenomenal job in his second season. Already injected a lot of life into that program. And you'll have to like the running game. Isidore Jackson was a very talented tailback and should do wonders this season. And he also has some added depth. Defensively, they have a very solid defensive line. The linebacking cores are the best in the conference, and the secondary could be the best. They have a lot of playmakers back there led by their safety, Michael Williams. Causes for concern. I look at the losses at the 2 key spots. Quarterback, can he replace Matt Johnson? And wide receiver Javon Reams was a big playmaker for them last season. What we will learn is that getting South Carolina State and also getting Florida A&M at home is going to prove to be huge for the Bethune-Cookman Wildcats as they win the conference title and get into the playoffs for a second year in a row. For more FCS conference previews, visit footballgameplan.com/FCS or visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/footballgameplan. And listen to the Football Game Plan radio show, which airs Saturdays 11 a.m. Eastern Time at blogtalkradio.com/footballgameplan.